What's up, everybody, and welcome to the Early Edge. Happy Tuesday. We're on to the divisional round, but today we're not talking much football. We're going to be talking college basketball, NBA, some NHL. So stay tuned for that. Speaking of football and speaking of the wild card playoffs, let's take a look at the recap screen from yesterday. We came into today on the week 64-33. Another positive day. We had more green. I believe we won 12 out of 20. We want it to be a little bit higher than that. I hit my Bucks and Dalton Kincaid prop. Mackenzie Brooks going 2 out of 3 and hitting the first touchdown score. EC 3 out of 4. Dave Richard hitting his bet. RJ White hitting his bet on the Bucks with me. Pretty good recap. And speaking of football, it's Tuesday, right? So don't forget at 4 o'clock today, we are going to have the divisional round kickoff preview. You know who that's with, right? It's with RJ White, usually with the Maestro, sometimes Mike McClure, Emery Hunt. That's going to be a very important show for you to lock in on, especially early, because we know guys like RJ and Maestro get those lines early before they move. All right, that's today. Let's bring in the stars of the show, the here and now. We've got a packed house. It's none other than Zack Cimini, Buckets. We've got Mikey B and Griffin Carroll. Like I said, we're going to be talking about all things NBA, college basketball, NHL, and we have the crew to do it. But for right here, right now, Mikey B, I want your attention because we got to talk about the 3 NBA matchups. So let's just get into that before we get into our official bets. Mikey B, odds powered by BetMGM. Let's talk about, and Zach, of course. Zach, you're staying with me too. My fault on that one. We're going to talk Nuggets Sixers. I think this is the marquee matchup of the day. We've got the 3 games, so it's not really saying much with only a 3-game slate, but this one is really interesting to me. Mikey B, I'm going to start with you. I suspect that the Nuggets and the Sixers are going to be mostly at full strength, but we have questionable tags across the board. Do you agree with me that the superstars and the starters are going to be playing today? And am I just speculating here?
Yeah, this game, this is a typical NBA night right here. This game is wild. The Nuggets have listed their entire starting 5 as questionable. So we don't know if Jokic, Murray, Porter, Gordon, Caldwell-Pope, we don't know if any of those guys are going to play. It's also the second game of a back-to-back set for the 76ers. Joel Embiid made his return from a knee injury yesterday. Nick Nurse says he expects him to play today. We don't know how that's actually going to – we don't know if that's actually going to take place or not. Still early in the day. Right now, I would take the 76ers on the money line. I would pay the juice simply because they're 15-6 at home, and Nuggets are just 11-9 on the road. But this is one we're going to have to watch throughout the day because we don't know who's going to play for either team right now.
Yeah, and I wonder I wonder, Zach, if this line is going to fluctuate even more. I mean, because it's really been dancing, I think, between like 1 and 3.5. We're at 2.5 now at BetMGM. My gut is to take the Sixers as well. I trust that Embiid's going to play today. And I'm not in love with the Nuggets on the road here. What do you think in this one?
Yeah, for me, it's Embiid or nothing. You don't want part of the side or total with so many players from the Denver Nuggets questionable. They were all listed questionable yesterday. The whole entire starting 5, as Mikey B was saying. So that leads me to think that at least three or four players will not play. You look at their weekend, they played in a back-to-back spot as well. The night game Saturday, the early midday game Sunday. So 3 games in 4 nights. This Nuggets team, you don't want to risk anything with the type of issues you've had with this team. Embiid back yesterday, he looked fine. Go back to last year against the Nuggets, had that explosive game with 47 points. So for me, it's Embiid or nothing here.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with that. Monitor, obviously, the injury situation, but again, I think if you get a good money line price here, I think taking the Sixers now, I don't think that's a terrible move. All right, light the beam, Big Cheesy says. Anytime the Kings are playing, and I got to be honest, he might say it anytime the Kings aren't even playing. So shout out to Big Cheesy in the chat, Bradley Jacobs, Nicholas Edwards, Anderson Andrews, Spaghetti and Meatballs. We see y'all in there. Hit the like button if you can. We got the Kings at the Suns. The Suns -4.5. My gut tells me, Mikey B, and by the way, the total here, 244.5, pretty high total. My gut tells me just take the Suns here. But I don't know. The Sacramento Kings have been playing a little bit better lately. And so I don't know if 4.5 is just like a perfectly efficient number to get me to lay off of this one, but I do lean the Suns. Where do you lean on this one?
Yeah, I would lean the Suns too. The big thing we've got on the King side here is Keegan Murray is listed as questionable with a hip injury. That's a big absence for them if he doesn't play. The Suns are playing well with their big 3 healthy, Beal, Booker, and Durant. They're actually 7-3 over their last 10 games. I'd feel better about the Kings' chances of covering if Murray does play, but right now I would lean towards the Suns.
Ninja 13 says, only good thing in Philly now is the 76ers because the Eagles are a fraud, which you could have gotten from us yesterday because a lot of us were, including myself, were on the Buccaneers +3. That line was a mystery to me. I 2.5, maybe 3 was an absolute gift. Zack Cimini, where are we at on this Suns-Kings game?
I'm actually going to give out a side. This is one of my official plays, so I'm not going to say too much here. One aspect I would look at, Mike McClure likes to do this where you attack the first quarter. I would maybe look at the under in the first quarter because the Kings, with maybe not Keegan Murray tonight, they're going to have to adjust that starting lineup. Coming back from 2 road games on the East Coast where they lost both of those matchups, the heartbreaker in overtime with Dame time, overtime game winner. Suns played at Portland on Sunday. So I would maybe look at the under first quarter before that scoring starts to pick up.
All right. Well, speaking of scoring picking up, let's go to a 236.5 point total. We got the Clippers at home. I mean, listen, the Clippers have been really impressive. It might have been, a week or two ago, Mikey B, where we had the Wednesday show with Tim Doyle, where me and Tim basically had to like mea culpa, like, hey, this Clippers team is better than we thought they were going to be when James Harden joined. So I guess this team is for real. They're -6.5. I believe OKC, of course, they played the Lakers last night, and they're on a back-to-back here. This is a pretty aggressive line, but I don't hate it. Where are you at on this one, Mikey B?
So this line is moving more in the Clippers' favor, and the reasoning might be Shai Gilgeous-Alexander was a game-time decision yesterday with a knee injury. Now, he did play. He logged 34 minutes, but because he had that injury and it's the second game of back-to-back set, does he play or not? If he doesn't, then you really like the Clippers even at that big number. They're also 6-3 against the spread over their last 9 games. The Clippers are. So I think this all comes down to whether or not Gilgeous-Alexander plays. As of right now, I would lean towards the Clippers covering because I think he might sit out.
All right, Zach, before I get to you, I got to go to Mikey B here because, what I sense in your voice, and you're such a professional, so it's so subtle. It's the attorney in me, like the poker player in me, like kind of reading between the lines. I sense, it's only a 3-game slate, and yet we have so many question marks with who's going to play. I'm sensing a little frustration on your end. I'm just wondering, am I right about that, or am I just like reading into it way too heavy?
Yeah, I was digging through everything this morning, and I'll talk about this later when I make my picks too. There's not a lot to like at 10 a.m. Eastern time in the NBA because there's so many guys that are questionable. So this is a day where you might want to sit on your hands at least until mid-afternoon before you start locking in those NBA plays.
Yeah, certainly decent advice. I think sometimes you can take advantage of the unknown if you think you have a read on it, if you think you have a line on, no pun intended, on who's going to play and who doesn't, because maybe you'll get the better of the line. But in some cases, it really does seem like it's a 50-50 proposition. Zack Cimini, Thunder at Clippers. Clippers -6.5, 236.5. What do you like in this one?
Here, too, I would look at the full game under 236.5 with the Thunder playing in a back-to-back spot. I know they don't have to go anywhere being in LA, but that was a hard game yesterday. Back and forth. There was a lot of lead changes. They were kind of flat in terms of scoring, had 93 points, had that little run at the end that teams do when the game is over. But they struggled to score yesterday, back-to-back spot against a Clippers team that they were just awful in Sunday's matchup against the Timberwolves. You would have expected a better performance from them. Just couldn't get scoring going, 43% from the field, never really made a run at all. And they've played 5 of 7 road games. So I think they may be a little fatigued as well, even though they're on their home court. I'll look at the full game under 236.5.
David Talk says, how does the NBA get away with not saying who is playing and not playing? I mean, listen, that's just the state. That's just the state of the game at this point. It's what happens when you have an 82-game season, and stars do need to rest sometimes. But it probably does seem a bit overdone. And by the way, David Talk, I see you dropping NHL knowledge in the chat, so I think we all appreciate that. And Ninja 13 responding to some of that NHL talk. And for the record, Griffin's coming back on the show, so we'll have some NHL picks. And where can you make those picks? How about BetMGM? New BetMGM customers can sign up today and get $158 in bonus bets. Just place your first wager of at least $5, and you will receive $158 in bonus bets, regardless of your wager's outcome, with bonus code EDGE158. That's EDGE158. All right, we got to bring those two guys back. I didn't even say hi to those guys. I just dispatched them. Terrible hosting on my part. So we got to bring them back. But before we do that, let's hear a message from our partners. Big time Tigers fan says, when do the sportsbook clamp down on the NBA's foolishness? They don't. That's not a thing. Wish it was, but that's just not a thing. Okay, what's also not a thing is, listen, Griffin, Buckets, you came onto the show. I got to be honest, I'm not used to you guys kind of like going off into the chat and leaving us for any period of time. So I probably should have said hi to you guys before you did that. Griffin, I'm going to start with you because there's so much NHL talk in the chat today, which it's got to excite you, because I got to tell you, every time you're not on the show, people are like, well, where are the NHL picks? And we always say SportsLine and, that kind of thing. But everybody's really happy to have you on the show. How are you doing today?
I'm good. I just spent the weekend in LA with some friends, so took a couple days off of hockey. I mean, can't bet out there, but excited to be back for sure. I got to clearly take this banner off. This team is horrible behind me. So it was great to stay up late just to watch them disappoint me again. But now they won't hijack my nights anymore. So I feel free as a bird and ready to focus on hockey for the next couple months.
Free as a non-Eagle bird, indeed. Buckets, I got to ask you, we got a little name drop from Griffin there. He's like, I was out in LA with my boys. Like it sounded like pretty cool. Where were you this last weekend?
This last week, I was sick. I was in urgent care. I was at the emergency vet. And last night, I was up till 4 a.m. doing World of Warcraft raids. So a bit of a different life between me and Griffin, it sounds like.
Take that, Griffin Carroll.
I mean, that sounds great too.
1-0 Buckets. All right. Speaking of 1-0 Buckets, let's actually get to your pick, which I don't think is going to end up as a 1-0 proposition based on where you think this game is going to go. So talk to us about your soccer pick today.
All right, Sia, this is going to be my one and only warning to everybody here. I am, in fact, betting on a cup match. So if you are someone who does not like betting on cup competitions, you can just ignore this pick. But this is a cup I love, and these are two teams that I love for goals. I'm looking at the KNV Becker match between Excelsior Rotterdam and FC Groningen. I'm taking one of my favorite same-game parlays here. Both teams to score and over 2.5 goals at -110 to get that juice down. These are two clubs that, most importantly, care about the cup. Both managers have gone on record saying that this match will be treated like an actual domestic league game. They are not going to rotate starters. They are not going to rest. Both teams have full intention of winning this match. And when you look at these two clubs, two of the most offensive teams in Dutch football, two of the best counter-attacking teams in Dutch football, and two of the worst defenses in Dutch football. Groningen has hit the over in back-to-back-to-back matches. Meanwhile, Excelsior Rotterdam has now hit both teams to score in 11 matches straight, and both of these clubs hit the BTTS and the over in their most recent KNVB Becker Cup match here. BTTS and over 2.5, frankly, at -110 seems a little bit like a gift, because I was expecting to play this all the way up to -150, Sia.
I got to ask you again, because I don't want to screw this up on the recap screen. Pronounce those two names for me.
Excelsior Rotterdam, and I'm guessing on FC Groningen. Usually if I roll my L's a bit, it sounds fancy enough that people don't question it.
That was very eloquent. That was very, very well done. Thank you for that. By the way, people are trying to, Buckets, they're trying to play doctor in the chat and just trying to keep you out of the ER as much as possible. I'm not going to go over the recommendations. It's basically like WebMD in the chat right now, but maybe after the show, you can go back in and maybe heed some of this advice, because we got to keep you out of the ER, my friend.
WebMD is tough because I Google cough and it says you're dying. Like,
yes.
Sorry. So I kind of ignore WebMD, but maybe the chat will be better than that.
True story. I've actually come to ignore, like, I don't Google stuff anymore, because it just gives you the anxiety that, like, whatever you're fraught with in that moment, it just makes it worse, because the anxiety you receive when you look up whatever the ailment is. So that's my WebMD or Google advice there. All right, Griffin Carroll. We talked about teams to score here, and you have a couple of picks and you have a lot of scoring. So talk to us about your NHL plays.
Sure. Real quick, before I get there, I would like to just a little disclaimer. I feel like the first couple shows I was on, very prop heavy with shots on goal. We had some conversations about props also. I've retired shots on goal until further notice. I'm free to not listen to myself at any point, but based on how many people talk hockey in here, it's great. A lot of people bet hockey. I would just recommend maybe going light on that prop for a little bit. I'm finding the most obvious spots are not delivering, and there's so many stat corrections. It's just a little too frustrating right now. So little disclaimer there on how I'm looking at hockey right now. So anyway, 2 picks. They're a pair of overs. First one is Colorado, Ottawa, over 7, which I was able to get at +116. This and the next over I'm about to mention, you could get at 6.5. Maybe you pair them together if you want. They're -140 to -160. So I'm jumping to a flat 7. If it's a push, so be it. Colorado on the road, averaging 7 goals per game last month. Ottawa at home, averaging 8.1. So that's a nice foundation there. And then you look at how when these teams meet, the over's hitting 5 straight. 4 of them have had 9 goals or more, which I love. I see a pretty big power play edge here for the Avalanche, so I expect them to carry the load. And even just looking at recent games, the over's hitting 5 of the last 6 for Colorado and 3 straight for Ottawa. So I'm liking goals here. And the second one is very simple. It's Toronto-Edmonton, also over 7, which I was able to get at +100. This one, the numbers might not suggest it as much. The defenses are relatively solid, but I'm finding the most successful betting approach lately. And if you follow me on SportsLine, you probably have caught on to this. When 2 elite offenses are meeting, I'm finding the goals have just been flying. And that's what we have here tonight. Toronto's averaging the 5th most goals. Edmonton's averaging the 6th most. So I'm going super small-brained and just banking on these 2 elite offenses, pushing the pace and going goal for goal. I would love like a 5-4 overtime type of game. These teams last played last March twice in the span of about a week, and we saw 11 and 7 goals. So hoping for a repeat here tonight.
Yeah, that'll certainly be exciting. Even for the marginal NHL fans, for those of you out there, these types of games, really make hockey exciting, kind of get, pique your interest. And we're not anywhere close to the playoffs, but I will say this, Griffin, you'd agree with me that playoff hockey is because you follow all sports. I know you even had some NFL props this weekend that you put out, which I think you hit at a pretty great rate. You can address that in a second, but playoff hockey, that is probably, in your opinion, maybe the most intense playoff situation sport, or at least up there.
Definitely. And last May, when we got into like the second round, that was probably the best month I've ever had betting. I find when these teams get into those 6 and 7 game series, you can really sort of trust either the players to keep stepping up, or even just like if a team goes down 0-2 and they come back home and they win, definitely getting the best effort. And I'm finding the last 2 years have had a lot of betting success there. So we got a couple months till we get there, but yeah, playoffs are awesome in hockey for sure.
Love that. Everybody buckle up for that. Meanwhile, follow Griffin Carroll's picks here on the show and at SportsLine. All right, it's interesting. I don't know what he was referring to necessarily, but Jinx the Mouse in the chat said something like, do the opposite of obvious, or that's what he does. He always does the opposite of obvious. That's sort of where my pick comes in. This is one of the very few situations where I'm kind of like taking my analytical side, and I'm not putting it to the side here, but when I see a fishy line, I usually don't care. I just dig into the game, and it doesn't really matter if the line is fishy or if the sharps are on one side. It doesn't matter to me, at least. I just want to see where things lie from my vantage point specifically. But this St. John's line at Seton Hall, it's a little fishy to me. I think the way Seton Hall's been playing, they should be favored by 3 or 4 points. And so I felt like I had to take a second look here, and it's got me on St. John's money line -110. Again, St. John's on the road. And I'll say this, Seton Hall has been very good. I've lost betting against Seton Hall. I think it was a couple of weeks ago when they played Providence, but they've beaten some really good teams, like really top teams. And St. John's has also been pretty good. But again, you would think the way Seton Hall's been playing, the teams that they've been taking down on the road and at home, that they'd be a 3 or 4 point favorite. And that's part of the reason I'm taking St. John's money line. St. John's has knocked off some really good teams. They just had a really tough loss against Creighton, but they beat Providence, they beat Nova, they beat Butler prior to that. I think this team is emerging. I like them defensively. I like the rebounding edge they're likely to have against Seton Hall. So I'm going to go with St. John's money line on the road against Seton Hall. Hope this one doesn't bite me, but again, fishy line. I'm going to go ahead and take the road team here. All right. That is my college basketball pick. You can watch that on national television, by the way. I believe that's an 8:30 start on FS1. Let's take a quick break before we get to Zach and Mikey B's pick right now.
I'm on new level. It's a Super Cup semifinal showdown on CBS Sports Network and streaming live on Paramount Plus.
We have questions in the chat. First of all, Big Cheesy says, I like Seton Hall tonight. I understand why you like Seton Hall. I mean, that was pretty much my whole setup for my pick. Is I went into it thinking they'd be a favorite. I kind of liked Seton Hall as well, but Glenn says St. John's first half. Actually, no. If anything, I could see Seton Hall coming out with some fire in the first half, and St. John's kind of chipping away and getting the outright win to close this game. All right, let's close this show, but we got a lot of picks to go before we do it. Zack Cimini, you've got a pick in college basketball, and you've got a pick in the NBA, which is kind of like, now that I'm looking at it, it's something I was leaning toward when we went to the marquee matchups. So go ahead and start with college basketball, if you would.
Yeah, actually, I'm going to start with the Phoenix Suns. I'm going to get the
Okay,
NBA out of the way. The Phoenix Suns -4.5 against the Sacramento Kings. Something that, like you just said, Sia, is examining the spread on what it would be. That Seton Hall, St. John's game, you think that it would be -3 on Seton Hall side. This is what I thought with this Phoenix Suns line. If this was a week ago, I think this spread would be -2, -2.5. But the Suns are playing so much better right now. And we're going to start to see that going forward with this Phoenix Suns team. I love this number at -4.5. Sacramento Kings, they are backpedaling, lost 2 straight games, especially against teams above 500. They are really struggling. They have no answers defensively. They were blown out by a Philadelphia 76ers team that was undermanned, up 6 in overtime on Sunday against the Milwaukee Bucks. Did not get a stop to end the game and allowed Damian Lillard to hit the game winner. So Sacramento backpedaling. I like the way the Suns are playing right now. They turned the corner in that blowout win over the Lakers. And on Sunday, really, they played the Portland Trailblazers. They let Portland do their thing, get back in the game, up 5 late in the fourth quarter. But all of a sudden, when they wanted to pour it on, they did. KD elbow shot, Devin Booker transition dunk, Bradley Beal, one of his easy pull-up shots. All of a sudden, it got to the number late at 14. Portland hit a backdoor 3 with Simons hitting that three-pointer. But they can pick their spots when they want. I love the way they're playing offensively. We'll go with the Suns -4.5. And then the second play, we're going to go out to the Southern Conference in college basketball and grab Samford +2 against Western Carolina. This is one of those games where I think you see a point spread flip all of a sudden. It went from Samford -1 to Western Carolina -2 in less than an hour last night. I was already going to be on Samford's side -1, so that's good for me. This is a Western Carolina team that's 15-2 on the year. They had the win over Vanderbilt, had the win over Notre Dame, and recently they've been covering on small numbers. They covered -3.5 against Citadel, -1.5 against East Tennessee State. But college basketball, it will hone you in when it's too good to be true. And that's what I'm thinking here with this Western Carolina team. Samford leads the country in scoring. They average 91 points per game. They are also 15-2. They've started the year 0-2, won 15 straight games, and they defeated this Western Carolina team twice last season. I'm going with Samford. I think the line movement was wrong here. I wouldn't be surprised if it goes back in their favor slightly. Samford +1.
Love both of these picks. Definitely leaning on the Suns minus that 4.5 as well. So I really like that. And by the way, a lot of chat about St. John's Seton Hall. I'm glad I got some Big East action going on in the chat. And it looks like Danny Brasco might also be on St. John's. He says big money coming in on St. John's. So that is very interesting. All right, Mikey B. Now, I saw the frustration. It's a 3-game slate. We're not exactly sure who's playing. You usually come with a couple of props per show. But I love the discipline that you're harnessing today because you said it yourself. There's a lot of unknown, but you were able to find at least one prop that you liked. Talk to us about it.
We're not just going to light money on fire and go heavy on player props this morning, partially because there aren't a lot available, because there are so many guys listed as questionable. So I'm going to go with James Harden over 8.5 assists. There's quite a bit of juice on that at -140, but I still like it. He has at least 8 assists. He has at least 9 assists in 8 of his last 9 games. He had only 8 against the Timberwolves the other day, but they have the best defensive rating in the league, so not too worried about that. He had, during that 8-game span, he had at least 10 assists 5 times, so he's really been busy in the double-digit assists too. Now, the thing here with the Thunder, they have the 5th best defensive rating in the league. That seems bad. However, they've played at the 6th fastest pace. That has contributed to them allowing the 12th most assists per game in the league. Harden should have the ball in his hands a lot, which gives him a favorable opportunity to hit this over 8.5 assists. We're going to wait. Maybe we'll have some more on SportsLine later. But right now, we're just going to play NBA player prop of James Harden over 8.5 assists.
All right. James Harden indeed. Real quick, by the way, I do want to remind everybody before we get out of here, and we'll put the recap screen up in a second. And by the way, Buckets, I do want to, and I'm gonna address this in a second, Buckets, but I want to remind everybody about some programming later. I want to know if you read the chat and got maybe some medical advice from some of our viewers and listeners. But real quick, just a reminder: 4 p.m. today. Do not forget divisional best bets. Again, that's going to be with the regular crew, and that is. I can't stress it enough. And I always bring it up when we do like our weekend shows, whether it's a primetime show or the NFL kickoff show on Sunday. We always see that the lines have changed really in our favor when we're 4 days or when we're 1 day out from the game. So if you watch this show when it's live, you're going to get the best of the line. So just keep that in mind. Another just thing that I keep reminding people, or at least I try to keep reminding people, don't forget about the Sports Podcast Awards. We are a finalist for the best fantasy betting and gaming category in the Sports Podcast Awards. To help us bring home some hardware, use the link in the description and go vote. Voting is open until January 28th. So we have 12 days to do it, but why not just do it right now? All you got to do is hit the link and vote for the early edge. Buckets, did you get any medical advice from the chat that you might harness and take with you?
Absolutely not, Sia. The first comment I read said, maybe don't stay up till 4 a.m. playing video games, and I knew that it was going to be all nonsense past that, so just ignoring it for the most part right now. I'll get better eventually.
Playing video games and watching soccer, don't forget. That's a very important part of the equation. All right, speaking of equations, let's get the recap screen up here, see if I can pronounce some of Bucket's picks. It's Excelsior Rotterdam versus FC Gargamel from the Smurfs. No, FC Groningen, I believe. He rolled an R and an L, and I can't do it. BTTS plus over 2.5 at -110. Mikey B. James Harden over 8.5 assists at -140. I've got St. John's money line -110, a highly controversial pick in the early edge chat. Zack Cimini's on Samford +2, and the Suns -4.5. Griffin Carroll, Avalanche Senators over 7 at plus money. Maple Leafs Oilers over 7 at even money. Love those odds. Love this show. Love everybody being so active in the chat with your advice for Buckets and with your advice on picks. Listen, David Talk, I see there's so many of you that are dropping a lot of hockey knowledge, a lot of college basketball knowledge, some NBA picks, lighting the beam and such. We are doing it all in the chat, but also on this show. So we appreciate you participating with us, hitting the like button. All of that stuff too is always very helpful. But we got to end the show now. On behalf of Mikey B, on behalf of Zack Cimini, on behalf of Griffin Carroll and Buckets and Jake the Snake on the ones and twos, I am the Counselor of Cash. This is the Early Edge, and we rest our case.